Hashtag the Ferryman Tapes. Between 1991 and 1997, somewhere in East Tennessee, a man in a handmade mask sat behind a desk and asked people the same question over and over again. What did you see when you died? That's the premise. A public access television show. Guests who had survived clinical death sat across from this masked host and described, in extraordinary and sometimes disturbing detail, what happened to them in the space between life and whatever comes after. The show aired for 6 years. Roughly 40 hours of footage exists across 23 VHS tapes. And here is the part that should make the hair on your arms stand up. No television station in the Knoxville area, or anywhere in East Tennessee, has any record of this program ever existing. No broadcast logs. No scheduling archives. No FCC filings. Nothing. The tapes were discovered in 2022 during a storage locker auction. 2 years later, internet investigators managed to identify 3 of the guests who appeared on the show. All 3 are dead. None of them died of natural causes. And every single one of them died within 12 months of their recorded appearance on a program that, by all official accounts, never aired. This is the story of the Ferryman Tapes. And I need to warn you. The deeper you go into this, the less anything makes sense. Let's start with what we know for certain, because the list is shorter than you'd expect. In March of 2022, a man named Dale Compton purchased the contents of a storage unit at a public auction held at a facility called StoreMax on Chapman Highway in South Knoxville. Dale runs a small resale business, mostly flipping furniture and electronics from these auctions on Facebook Marketplace and local flea markets. The unit he purchased that day was unremarkable. A few pieces of water-damaged furniture. Boxes of old clothes. A broken dehumidifier. And 2 cardboard boxes, sealed with packing tape that had yellowed and become brittle with age, containing 23 VHS tapes. The tapes had no commercial labels. Each one bore a strip of masking tape with a handwritten number, 1 through 23, and a date range. The earliest date written on any tape was September 14, 1991. The latest was March 3, 1997. Dale assumed they were home recordings, maybe old family videos or taped television programs. He owns a VCR, one of the reasons he occasionally buys lots of old tapes at auctions, and that evening he slid tape number 1 into the machine. What he saw unsettled him enough that he watched all 23 tapes over the following week. What he saw unsettled him enough that he didn't tell anyone about them for almost 4 months. And what he saw unsettled him enough that when he finally did share them, posting short clips to a TikTok account in July of 2022, the response was immediate and intense. Within 72 hours, the clips had accumulated over 2 million combined views. Within 2 weeks, an entire community of investigators had formed around the tapes. And within a year, people started finding things in the footage that I don't think anyone was prepared for. But before we get to the identifications, before we get to the deaths, we need to talk about the show itself. Because the content of these tapes is deeply, fundamentally wrong in ways that go beyond the mystery surrounding them. The program appears to have been called the Ferryman Hour, though that name only appears on screen during what seems to be an updated intro sequence starting around tape 9, which corresponds to late 1993. Before that, the show opens with a simple title card, white text on a black background, reading only the Ferryman in a serif font that looks like it was generated by a character generator common in public access studios of that era. There is no station identification. No production credit. No copyright notice. The title card holds for approximately 12 seconds over a low, droning musical tone that sounds like it was produced on a synthesizer, a single sustained chord that shifts almost imperceptibly in pitch. It is, by any standard, an unpleasant sound. After the title card, the camera fades in on a set. And here I need to describe this set because it becomes important. The background is entirely black. Not dark, black. It appears to be draped in black fabric, possibly velvet, that absorbs all light and creates the impression of a void behind the 2 figures on screen. There is a desk, simple, wooden, that looks like it might be a repurposed kitchen table. 2 chairs. A single overhead light source that casts hard downward shadows on the host and the guest, leaving their eye sockets darkened and their features somewhat difficult to read. There is no set decoration of any kind. No logo. No plants. No props. Nothing. Just 2 people sitting in what appears to be an infinite darkness, talking about death. The host is a man. His build suggests someone between 30 and 50 years old, medium height, medium frame. His voice is calm, measured, and carries what linguists who have analyzed the footage describe as a generalized Upper South accent consistent with someone raised in East Tennessee or Western North Carolina, though certain vowel patterns suggest he may have spent time in the Midwest. He wears the same outfit in every episode across all 6 years, a dark suit, either black or very dark navy, a white dress shirt, no tie, and a mask. The mask deserves its own discussion. It is handmade, apparently constructed from papier-mâché or a similar material, painted white with minimal detail. It covers the entire face. The eye holes are slightly too large, creating an impression of hollow, dark sockets rather than allowing a clear view of the wearer's eyes. The mouth is painted on, a thin, straight, neutral line that is neither smiling nor frowning. In early episodes, the mask appears freshly made, the surface smooth and the paint even. By later episodes, it has yellowed slightly, and there appear to be hairline cracks around the jawline. It is, in every way, one of the most unsettling objects I have ever seen on screen, not because it is grotesque or frightening in its design, but because it is so deliberately, aggressively neutral. It is a face that has been emptied of all expression. It is a face that is watching you and giving you absolutely nothing in return. Now let's talk about the interviews themselves. Each tape contains between 90 minutes and 2 hours of footage, and most tapes include 2 to 3 interviews. In total, the 23 tapes contain approximately 62 distinct interviews with different individuals. The format is consistent throughout the entire run of the show. The host, the ferryman, asks questions. The guest answers. That's it. There is no banter. There is no warmth. There are no cutaways. The camera, which appears to be operated by a single stationary camera, possibly unmanned, holds on a medium 2 shot for the entire conversation, occasionally zooming slowly, almost imperceptibly, toward the guest's face during moments of heightened emotion. The questions follow a rough pattern that repeats across all 62 interviews. The ferryman begins by asking the guest to describe the circumstances of their near-death experience, the accident, the medical event, whatever brought them to the threshold. He then asks them to describe the moment of transition, the point at which they became aware that something was different, that they were no longer fully in their body or fully in the world. He asks what they saw. He asks what they heard. He asks what they felt. He asks if there was a presence. He asks if the presence communicated with them. He asks if they were given a choice. He asks if they wanted to come back. And then he asks a question that appears in almost every single interview, always phrased exactly the same way. Did it know your name? I want to sit with that question for a moment because I think it's important. Most near-death experience research focuses on the classic elements, the tunnel, the light, the sensation of peace, the life review, the encounter with deceased relatives. The ferryman doesn't seem particularly interested in any of that. When guests describe tunnels or lights, he listens politely and moves on. What he is interested in, what he returns to obsessively across 6 years of interviews, is the presence. Not God. Not angels. Not dead relatives. A presence. A singular, unnamed awareness that the guests encountered during their experience. And he wants to know, with an intensity that borders on desperation, whether that presence knew who they were. The answers are what makes the footage so difficult to watch. Roughly 40 of the 62 guests describe encountering something during their near-death experience that they struggle to name. They call it a figure. A shadow. A feeling. A weight. Several describe it as standing at the edge of their vision, always just outside the area they could see clearly. Several describe it as waiting. And at least 17 of the 62 guests, a number that has been confirmed by multiple independent reviewers who have catalogued every interview, say yes. Yes, it knew their name. Some of them say it spoke their name. Some say they simply understood, without being told, that it recognized them. And every single one of those 17 guests, on camera, exhibits the same physiological response when answering this question. They touch their own face. It's subtle. Some touch their forehead. Some touch their cheek. Some cover their mouth. But they all do it. Every one. 17 people across 6 years, and they all make the same unconscious gesture when confirming that something on the other side of death knew who they were. I want you to understand what that means from a statistical standpoint. Behavioral analysts who have reviewed the footage have noted that this kind of consistent, unrehearsed microgesture across unrelated subjects is essentially unprecedented. People don't do this. Not across a sample size this large. Not consistently. Not without being coached or primed. So either all 17 of these people were coached to make the same gesture, or all 17 of them experienced something so similar and so fundamentally disturbing that their bodies responded to the memory of it in exactly the same way. I don't know which possibility is more frightening. Now, let's talk about what happened when people started trying to identify the guests. The Ferryman Tapes community, which primarily operates through a dedicated subreddit and a Discord server, began systematic identification efforts in late 2022. This is painstaking work. The guests are introduced by first name only, no last names are ever used on the show, and the footage quality is VHS grade, meaning facial details are soft and colors are unreliable. The community developed a methodology that combined facial analysis, the personal details mentioned during interviews, such as the type of accident or medical event, geographic references, and approximate age, and cross-referenced these against newspaper archives, hospital records, and public databases. By early 2024, 3 guests had been positively identified. And this is where everything changes. The first identification was a woman referred to on the show only as Denise. She appeared on tape 6, dated approximately to mid-1992. Denise described a near-death experience following a severe allergic reaction that caused anaphylactic shock. She was clinically dead for approximately 2 minutes before being resuscitated. She described the presence as a tall shape, darker than the dark, and when the ferryman asked if it knew her name, she said, it already knew everything. She touched her left temple as she said this. Investigators identified her as Denise Ware Burham, age 34 at the time of filming, a resident of Maryville, Tennessee, approximately 20 miles south of Knoxville. The identification was confirmed through a combination of facial comparison with her driver's license photo, which was obtained through public records, and the specific details of her anaphylactic event, which matched a 1991 emergency room admission at Blunt Memorial Hospital. Denise Burham died on February 11, 1993, approximately 7 months after her appearance on the show. She died in a single-vehicle accident on a rural road in Blount County. Her car left the road and struck a tree. The police report, which is a matter of public record, notes that there were no skid marks. No evidence of braking. No evidence of mechanical failure. Toxicology was clean. The investigating officer noted in his report, and I am quoting directly, that the vehicle appeared to have been deliberately steered off the roadway. The case was never classified as a suicide. It was never classified as anything. It remains, officially, an accident of undetermined cause. The second identification was a man called James on the show. He appeared on tape 11, approximately late 1993 or early 1994. James described a near-death experience following a heart attack. He was 46 years old. He was clinically dead for over 4 minutes. His description of the presence was the most vivid of any guest on the show. He described it as a man standing in a doorway, though there was no doorway and no room, just a man-shaped area where the light didn't reach. He said it didn't speak. He said it extended a hand. He said he understood that if he took the hand, he would go through the doorway. He did not take the hand. When the ferryman asked if it knew his name, James said something that has become one of the most discussed moments in the entire archive. He said, "It didn't just know my name. It knew the date." The ferryman paused. This is notable because the ferryman almost never pauses. His interview technique is fluid and seamless across all 62 conversations. But here, he stopped. For approximately 4 seconds, which is an eternity in an interview, he said nothing. And then he asked, "The date of what?" And James said, "I think you know." The ferryman moved on to the next question. He did not follow up. James was identified as James Robert Olson, a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. His identification was confirmed through employment records and a detailed match between his described cardiac event and hospital admission records from Methodist Medical Center. James Olson died on November 19, 1994, approximately 10 to 12 months after his appearance on the show. He died by suicide. He was found by his wife in the garage of their home. He left no note. His family reported that he had no history of depression or mental illness, and that in the weeks before his death, his only unusual behavior was a refusal to sleep. His wife told a local reporter, in a small article published in the Oak Ridge newspaper, that he said if he fell asleep, someone would be waiting. The third identification is the one that made the ferryman tapes national news, briefly, in the spring of 2024. A woman called Sandra on the show appeared on tape 19, dated approximately early 1996. Sandra described a near-death experience during a complicated surgical procedure. She did not specify the surgery. She was calm, composed, almost clinical in her description. She described the experience as passing through a membrane into a space that was not dark and not light but simply absent. She described the presence not as a figure but as a sound, a low vibration that she felt in her teeth and her bones. When the ferryman asked if it knew her name, she said yes. And then she said something that the ferryman had never been told by any other guest in the archive. She said, "It told me yours, too." The camera, which had been static for the entire interview, did something it had never done before. It moved. Not a zoom. A physical movement, as though someone had bumped the tripod or grabbed the camera. It was brief, less than a second, and could easily be dismissed as a technical glitch. But in all 23 tapes, across approximately 40 hours of footage, the camera never moves like that at any other point. Only here. Only when Sandra said she knew the ferryman's name. The ferryman did not respond to this. He sat in silence for 7 seconds. And then he ended the interview. The screen cuts to black. When the next interview begins, there is no reference to Sandra or her claim. The show continues as though it never happened. Sandra was identified as Sandra Delacroce, age 51 at the time of filming, a retired nurse living in Sevierville, Tennessee. Her identification was confirmed through surgical records and facial comparison with photographs provided by a surviving family member who contacted the investigation community directly after seeing clips online. Sandra Delacroce died on October 3, 1996, approximately 8 months after her appearance on the show. She died in a house fire at her residence. The fire was investigated by the Sevier County Fire Department and ruled accidental, attributed to a faulty space heater. However, the investigative community discovered an anomaly in the fire report that had never been publicly discussed. The fire investigator noted that the burn pattern was inconsistent with a single point of origin. There appeared to be 2 distinct areas where the fire started simultaneously, one near the space heater in the living room and one in the bedroom at the opposite end of the house. This was flagged in the report but never pursued further. The case was never reclassified. So, 3 identified guests. 3 deaths. 1 in a car that drove itself off the road with no explanation. 1 by suicide after refusing to sleep because someone was waiting. 1 in a fire that started in 2 places at once. all within a year of appearing on a show that no one can prove ever aired. Here are 5 things about this case that nobody has been able to explain. 1. StoreMax, the storage facility where the tapes were found, requires identification and a valid credit card to rent a unit. The unit containing the tapes was rented in August 1997, approximately 5 months after the last date written on any tape. It was rented under the name Calvin Morey. No person by that name exists in any public record database in Tennessee or any surrounding state. The credit card used was valid at the time of rental but was issued by a bank, First Federal Savings of Kingsport, that closed in 2003. All customer records were transferred to a successor institution that has no record of an account holder named Calvin Morey. The unit's rent was prepaid in cash for 25 years. 25 years from August 1997 is August 2022. The auction at which Dale Compton purchased the contents occurred in March 2022, 5 months before the prepaid period expired. This means the facility acted early. If they had waited 5 more months, the tapes would likely have been destroyed per the facility's stated policy of disposing of abandoned property after a 60-day grace period following lease expiration. The tapes almost didn't survive. 5 months was the margin. 2. No public access station in the Knoxville DMA, which includes stations in Knox, Blount, Anderson, Sevier, and surrounding counties, has any record of a program called The Ferryman or The Ferryman Hour. This is unusual but not, by itself, inexplicable. Public access records from the early 1990s were often poorly maintained. What is harder to explain is that no viewer has ever come forward. The tapes have been viewed, in clip form, by millions of people. The full archive has been viewed by thousands. The investigation has been covered by local news in Knoxville and by several national outlets. And yet not a single person has said, "I remember watching this show." Not one. In a region with a viewing population of roughly 500,000 people during the relevant time period, no one recalls ever seeing the ferryman on their television. 3. Audio analysis of the tapes, conducted by a sound engineer who volunteers with the investigation community, revealed something embedded in the droning tone that plays under the title card. When the audio is isolated, slowed to half speed, and amplified, there is a voice. It is barely perceptible and sounds as though it is speaking from an enormous distance or through some kind of barrier. The engineer described it as sounding like someone talking through a wall of water. The words have never been fully decoded. The most widely accepted partial transcription, arrived at through independent analysis by 3 separate audio professionals, suggests the voice is reciting a list of names. First names only. The names do not clearly match any of the guests who appear on the show. They do not clearly match anyone who has been identified in connection with the tapes. They are just names. Spoken by no one anyone can identify. Buried under a drone that no one was supposed to hear. 4. Tape 23, the final tape in the archive, is different from all the others. It contains only one interview, approximately 22 minutes in length, and it is the only interview in the entire archive where the guest never speaks. The guest is a young woman, apparently in her 20s, who sits across from the ferryman and does not respond to any of his questions. She does not appear distressed. She does not appear to be under duress. She sits calmly, hands folded, looking directly at the ferryman with an expression that multiple reviewers have described, independently and without coordination, as pity. She looks at him the way you might look at someone who is suffering and doesn't know it yet. The ferryman asks his standard questions. She doesn't answer. He asks about the presents. She doesn't answer. He asks if it knew her name. She doesn't answer. And then, at approximately the 21-minute mark, she does something. She reaches across the desk and places her hand on top of the ferryman's hand. He stops speaking. The camera holds on this image for approximately 45 seconds. Then the tape ends. There is no closing title card. There is no credit sequence. The program simply stops. This is the final piece of footage in the entire archive. The ferryman tapes begin with a question about death and end with a gesture of something that looks, impossibly, like comfort. No one knows who the young woman is. She has never been identified. 5. And this is the detail that keeps me awake. In 2023, a user on the Ferryman Tape subreddit conducted a frame-by-frame analysis of every interview and discovered something in Tape 15, an interview from approximately mid-1995. During this interview, the guest, a man called Robert, is describing his near-death experience, which followed a drowning accident. At approximately the 34-minute mark of the tape, there is a single frame, 1/30th of a second, where the image is replaced by something else. It is not a glitch. It is not an artifact of tape degradation. It is a deliberately inserted frame, a technique sometimes used in public access production, though rarely for any purpose other than crude special effects. The frame shows a photograph. It is a Polaroid-style photograph of a house. A small, single-story house with white siding and a gravel driveway, photographed from the road, apparently at dusk. There is a light on in one window. Sandra Delacroix's surviving niece, who had been in contact with the investigation community, saw this frame when it was posted online. She identified the house immediately. It was Sandra Delacroix's house. The house that burned down in October 1996. The photograph appears on a tape dated to mid-1995, more than a year before the fire. A photograph of a house that hadn't burned yet, on a tape that was recorded before the fire happened, on a show that no one remembers watching, hosted by a man no one can identify. I want to talk about theories, because the community has generated several, and some of them are more troubling than others. The first and most straightforward theory is that the Ferryman tapes are an elaborate hoax, a work of found footage fiction created either recently and artificially aged, or created in the 1990s as an art project. This theory has significant evidential problems. The VHS tapes have been examined by two independent specialists in magnetic media who have confirmed that the tape stock is consistent with commercially available VHS T120 cassettes manufactured between 1989 and 1996. The recordings exhibit wear patterns, dropout artifacts, and oxide degradation consistent with tapes that are approximately 30 years old. The equipment used to record them, based on signal characteristics, appears to be a consumer-grade VHS camcorder of 1990s vintage, not a modern device recording to old tape stock. The deaths of Denise Burham, James Olson, and Sandra Delacroix are real, documented events that occurred in the 1990s. For the tapes to be a hoax, someone would have had to research these deaths, write scripts that incorporated real details from hospital records and police reports, find actors willing to perform on camera, create a convincing 1990s public access aesthetic, and then store the tapes in a rented unit for 25 years on the chance that someone would eventually find them and investigate. It's possible. But it requires a level of effort and foresight that strains credulity. The second theory is that the show was real but operated outside normal channels, perhaps pirating a public access frequency or broadcasting from unlicensed equipment. This would explain the lack of station records but not the lack of viewers. Even pirate broadcasts have audiences. Someone would remember. The third theory is darker, and it's the one the community has coalesced around, though no one states it outright because stating it outright sounds insane. The theory is that the ferryman knew. That he wasn't just interviewing people about their near-death experiences. That he was selecting them. Identifying people who had seen the presence, who had been marked by it, who had been recognized by something on the other side, and that their appearance on the show was not a conversation but a documentation. A record. A before photograph. This theory is supported by the Sandra Delacroix Polaroid, which suggests foreknowledge of events that hadn't occurred yet. It is supported by James Olson's statement that the presence knew the date, and the ferryman's conspicuous refusal to ask the obvious follow-up question, as if he already knew the answer. It is supported by the show's obsessive, single-minded focus on whether the presence knew the guest's name, a question that makes no sense in the context of near-death experience research but makes perfect sense if you are trying to determine whether someone has been identified, catalogued, claimed by something. And it is supported by the mask. That empty, expressionless mask that the ferryman wore in every episode. Because in Greek mythology, the ferryman, Charon, is the figure who transports the dead across the river Styx to the underworld. He is not a figure of malice. He is not a demon. He is a functionary. A conductor. He doesn't decide who dies. He simply moves them from one side to the other. What if the man in the mask wasn't choosing these people? What if he was simply keeping a record of people who had already been chosen? What if the show wasn't for an audience at all? What if it was a ledger? This brings us to a detail I've been saving. In January of 2024, 3 months before the third identification was made public, a user on the Discord server received a private message from an account that had been created that same day and was deleted within an hour of sending the message. The message contained no text. It contained a single image. The image was a photograph, apparently taken with a phone camera pointed at a physical photograph. It showed the ferryman's desk and set, shot from an angle behind the desk, from the host's perspective. The camera was visible in the shot, confirming that it was unmanned, positioned on a tripod approximately 8 feet from the desk. But the photograph was taken from a position to the left of the desk, meaning there was someone else in the room. Someone behind the camera. Someone who was never visible in any of the footage. The chair on the guest's side was empty. But there was something on the desk that never appeared in any of the taped episodes. A notebook. A simple composition notebook, the kind with a black and white marbled cover, was open on the desk. The image quality was too low to read what was written in it. But the page was full, top to bottom, in small, dense handwriting. The user who received the message reported it to the Discord moderators immediately. The account was already gone. The IP address, insofar as Discord makes such information available, traced to a VPN endpoint. There was no way to determine who sent it. But the photograph was analyzed. The metadata had been stripped. The image itself was examined for signs of digital manipulation and none were found. The set, the desk, the camera, the lighting, everything visible in the photograph is consistent with the set as it appears in the tapes. If the photograph is genuine, it means several things. It means someone involved in the production of the ferryman tapes is still alive. It means they have access to photographs from the set that were never part of the broadcast footage. It means they are aware of the investigation. And it means they chose to reveal that there was a notebook, a written record, that the show's audience, whoever or whatever that audience was, never saw. What was in the notebook? Names? Dates? I want to go back to the final tape for a moment. Tape 23. The Silent Woman. Because I think the end of the ferryman tapes tells us something that the investigation has been too focused on the deaths to notice. The ferryman asks his questions. The woman doesn't answer. He follows his script exactly as he has in every previous interview. The same cadence. The same phrasing. The same obsessive return to the presence, the name, the knowing. And she just looks at him. Not with fear. Not with confusion. With pity. She looks at him the way you would look at someone who has spent 6 years asking questions about a door because they're terrified of what's on the other side of it. She looks at him the way you would look at someone who has been keeping a ledger of the dead because it is the only way they know to stay on the right side of the ledger themselves. And then she reaches out. She puts her hand on his hand. And he stops. He doesn't pull away. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't ask another question. He just stops. And the camera holds on this image, these two people in a pool of light surrounded by absolute darkness, one of them touching the other with something that looks unbearably like tenderness, and then the tape ends. The show never aired again. The tapes went into a storage unit rented under a name that doesn't exist. And the ferryman disappeared. There are currently 59 unidentified guests remaining in the archive. The investigation community is actively working to identify more of them. But the work has slowed considerably, and for a reason that no one in the community likes to talk about openly. They are afraid of what they'll find. Every identification so far has led to a death. Not a natural death. A strange, premature, poorly explained death. The community has begun to quietly debate whether they should continue. Whether identifying these people is an act of investigation or an act of something else entirely. Whether opening a ledger and reading the names inside is something the names want, or something the ledger wants. I want to leave you with one final detail. It's small. It's easy to miss. But I think it might be the most important thing in the entire archive. In every interview, at the very end, after the last question has been asked and before the screen cuts to black, the ferryman says the same thing. It's not a sign-off. It's not a catchphrase. He says it quietly, almost under his breath, as though he's saying it to himself rather than to the guest or to any audience. He says, not yet. 62 interviews. 6 years. The same 2 words at the end of every single one. Not yet. Who was he talking to? What was he waiting for? What happens when the answer changes? The ferryman tapes are still being investigated. More identifications may come. More deaths may be confirmed. The masked man has never been identified. The notebook has never been found. The show has never been explained. And somewhere in the static of 23 VHS tapes, under a drone that sounds like the hum of something vast and patient, a voice is still speaking names that no one was ever supposed to hear. If you've seen something like this before, if you remember a show on late-night public access that felt wrong, that felt like it was looking back at you, I want to know. If you recognize any of the faces in this footage, any of the voices, any of the stories, the community needs to hear from you. And if you have a theory about the ferryman, about the presence, about what was in that notebook, about why a woman who never spoke looked at a man in a mask with an expression of infinite sadness and reached out to touch his hand as though she were the one comforting him, as though he were the one who needed saving, leave it below. What do you think really happened in that studio? And what do you think was on the other side of that mask?